Hi, Sarah. Welcome to Potterwatch.
Hi.
Can you tell the students who you are?
Yeah, I'm Sara Solnick. I'm a professor in the economics department, and I'm a very long time Harry Potter fan.
And Sarah, you actually listen to the podcast that gives us this Havruta process.
Yes, I have listened to it for a few years.
Cool. So can you tell us what your question is?
So my question relates to the end of the Prisoner of Azkaban book, when we find out what it was that Sirius had done and what James had done way back when all of them were in school to Snape. And it's kind of a two-part question, because I think that what Sirius did is really terrible, and I've never forgiven him for it, and I've always kind of held that in, it was absolutely vicious. And I think it's really the worst thing that any good character does, and there's never any accounting for it. And so
this is specifically when he sends Snape into the Whomping Willow when Lupin is in his werewolf state.
Yeah, so Snape would have been maybe bitten and changed to a werewolf, or maybe killed. And but yet Sirius is one of the most popular characters in the series, and I wonder why readers are okay with that and so willing to overlook what he did as a teenager. And I also wonder about the characters. When Harry and Hermione find out about this, they're really not very upset. So that is my question. Why is that okay for Sirius to do? Why isn't it taken more seriously?
Yeah. And then the text itself sort of describes it as like, are you going to hold this schoolboy grudge? I think Lupin says. And the trio says something like, oh, he just hates him because of that thing that happened when they were kids, kind of thing.
Well, it's constantly described as a prank or a joke. And that, I think, goes to why people are okay with it. I mean, I think it is massively downplayed. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the relative social standing of James, Sirius, and Snape. I mean, I think that James and Sirius were very popular. James was a star athlete. They were great students. And Snape was, I guess he must have been a good student, but he was, from a poor family. He didn't have any wizard pedigree. The Potters and the Blacks had been wealthy, and they had been, in the wizarding world for generations. And so I just see James and Sirius as being like the varsity athletes who are allowed to, rampage, and the victims who might be, much lower social status and kind of, they're unattractive, or there's other things sort of wrong with them, then the harm is overlooked. And that really bugs me.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the way that you phrase that, the idea of this really privileged class getting away with things really reminds me of the Malfoys. But when we see Draco in book 6 doing all sorts of things that endanger people's safety, people's lives, we don't feel compelled to forget that. He gets a redemptive arc at the end, but in book 6, nobody's like, oh, 16-year-old Draco, just hijinks. It's seen as this really serious thing.
Yeah, and I think when, Sirius attempted to do this very bad thing. Well, you could look at book 6 and say, look at what Harry did to Draco, right? Because that was a bad thing that actually, occurred. But he is completely overcome with remorse. I mean, he is horrified by it. And he never really intended any serious harm. He thought, I don't know what he thought, but, he thought it would be painful, but in no way life-changing, which he did almost kill Draco. But, Sirius for sure thought this was going to end very, very, very badly for Snape, possibly kill him. And he never seems to have any, nobody takes him to task for it. But I guess there's a couple other reasons why people might be okay with it, and I don't agree with those reasons. But one is that this sort of all's well that ends well, nothing really happened, But obviously the intention was there, and I don't think we should, forget about that. And Snape for sure never forgot about it, right? I mean, I think he's really, really legitimate in his longstanding grievance, because this was very severe. And the other thing that, like, I mentioned this to someone else, and they said, well, Sirius was in Azkaban for 12 years. So, he did get punished, like he did suffer, although it wasn't for that particular crime.
Do you think that's why readers, they've been primed to think that Sirius Black has killed 18 Muggles and Peter Pettigrew, and then it turns out all he did was endanger Snape's life, so we're like, is it that?
Yeah, I think that's why, it seems to me that's why, like, Harry and Hermione are okay with it. It's because they, they, of course, have warm feelings towards Harry's father. And it isn't until much, much later that Harry starts to have, like, more complicated feelings about his father. And, Harry is totally thrilled. Like, that's another thing that's a little surprising, was when Sirius was like, how about if you come live with me? And he's known him for, like, 4 or 5 minutes. He's like, absolutely. I'm never going to see the Dursleys again. And but so, yeah, all the sympathy is for James and Sirius. And of course, nobody likes Snape from moment one. So whatever happens to him. But yeah, it does seem a little out of character. I feel like, normally Harry and Hermione are both very aware of injustices. And regardless of who's perpetrating them, whether the sort of power status, and you would think that they would be a little concerned about Snape and what he went through, and but they do not seem to experience that.
Well, and I think about, so you mentioned the episode in book 6 with Draco. The other thing that I think of in terms of, like, a good character doing a very bad thing would be Harry's continuing to have Kreacher as a slave, which is, again, back to the Black family. So I guess one question I have is Sirius a good influence on Harry?
Well, I don't think he's a great influence on Harry. Right? I think that some of the other characters seem to feel like, well, he doesn't treat you, he's not taking care of you the way that a godfather should, right? Sees you as a replacement for James, and so he's not protecting you. And so, yeah, I think that is, yeah, Sirius to me, like, I don't admire him. I'm not sure what his main characteristic is. I think is sort of loyalty, right? And he is a dog, and that's what they're known for. But so he's very, very loyal to his friends from, the Marauder era. And then he's very loyal to Harry. Like, I fully believe he would do anything for Harry. And he did put himself through all kinds of things for him. But that's not like a higher purpose. Like, that's not an ethical, he's not fighting for right. He's fighting for, people I love, or people I feel like I need to take care of.
Yeah. He does always seem to be emotionally stunted.
Yeah. But of course, I know he was in Azkaban for all that time, and I don't want to, I think that was very damaging.
Yeah. Definitely. So you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned this in the original question, but about whether there are other good characters who do things that are perhaps unforgivable in this way. Yeah. And whether intention matters. I was thinking about Hagrid, who also says, hey, go over, in this case, to the trio. He says, follow the spiders, then you'll find out what's going on. And that turns out to lead Ron and Harry to Aragog, whose family wants to kill them, which actually is the outcome is the same, but his intention is very different, which makes it easy to be like, Hagrid didn't really think that through.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of reasons, right? One is that, yeah, Hagrid never really understands any actual danger from these creatures. But secondly, like, he was really trying to help them, right? They did get help from Aragog at that time. They got the information about, the chamber. So there was like this, they were facing a risk that Hagrid always downplays, but there was a noble purpose in what he advised them, whereas obviously, Sirius and James. Like, what has Snape ever done to them? I mean, he just, that was just trying to hurt him.
Yeah. And the other one, of course, is Dumbledore, who also is, preparing a child to send off to his death. I guess Harry's an adult by the time he reaches the final one, though I really feel like through his negligence, Dumbledore sends him to his death almost every book, and then he is miraculously saved in various ways.
Yeah, I mean, although, do you think, like, he could have not, right? I mean, like, he knows what's waiting in the forest when he goes in there, and he decides to go.
Yeah.
And so even though kind of Dumbledore showed him the path, he didn't, like, force him down that path.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more of a longer arc sort of thing. But he does things like, oh, here, have this invisibility cloak. And then, like, even in the very first one, and then sort of plants these things to get him into the... And I'm just like, he's 11. He's 11.
So you don't see that as, like, him passing on. I mean, it did belong to him, right? I mean, that he's like, oh, I've been holding on to this thing for all these years.
And then he returns the second time in that book with a note that says, just in case.
Right.
He's, I mean, I think there's a number of instances when Dumbledore really makes it possible for Harry to do these really dangerous things. And it's certainly not with the same ill intent that Sirius has. But again, he is endangering the life of this child who, I mean, if anything, is in his care in a way that Sirius and Snape don't have that relationship.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people, are very critical of Dumbledore and how he used Harry, because he did. I mean, I don't think you can, because he didn't take him on as a partner, really, right? He just manipulated him, and he didn't share information, which he later on said, maybe I could have, but I didn't, I could have done it differently and maybe even achieve that result. But it, in that case, I guess I think it worked. I'm not sure what else. It was a very, very heavy. The other thing is, I feel that he did it very deliberately, right? Like, Hagrid didn't really get what he was saying with the spiders, and but I think he really agonized over it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just projecting that onto him, but I think he was troubled by it, and sort of how much to do. And he didn't confide in anybody. He had to work that all out by himself, as far as we know. Right?
Yeah. Which is very different than Sirius, age 16, who thinks it's a funny thing to have. And I wonder, the language of it being a prank, the fact that the twins, Fred and George, see themselves as the heirs of this Marauders map, whether that this idea of them as being, oh, they're the senior jokesters, and so everything they do can be forgiven in the same spirit as the stink bombs or whatever that Fred and George set off.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the language is really, it's all set up to make you feel like it's okay and you can just play these tricks. And if you don't like somebody, you can harass them. And I mean, definitely, between Draco and the Slytherins and Harry, Ron, and Hermione, like, there are some of these things, but those are more of the status of truly schoolboy pranks, right? Like these badges and, dressing up to frighten somebody. Like, those are real pranks. And so I think that the author is trying to put that in the same category. And but just the word prank is, like, very loaded with being fun and being okay, and also being things that, I mean, it seems like a thing that boys do, right? I mean, I don't think we talk that much about girls playing pranks on each other.
I think we have the love potions. This is the closest that we get. Is sort of Lavender Brown. Is she the one with the love potions later on? I think it's the closest I think we get to any of the girls playing any kind of pranks.
But I'm not sure I would call it, right? That's maybe. I mean,
I guess, because that gets into a real kind of like roofies territory that is pretty uncomfortable. But
yeah, right. They put this stuff into Harry's chocolates and all, right? But they're, I mean, the prank is supposed to be for fun, right? Or whereas they really want him to
yeah.
respond.
But yeah, anyway, I think you're right. We at least don't see the girls doing it, in part because we don't see much of what the girls do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the books also, this is one of the first books where we start really thinking about at what age do we stop considering them children and start considering them adults. This is the same book where Mr. Weasley says, you know, what is it? Fudge keeps treating him like a child. We should treat Harry like a man. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. He's 13. But by 16, do we start to say, like, you know, Sirius is really responsible for what he did as a 16-year-old? At what age does that sort of turn over?
Yeah, but I mean, they do let Harry stay in that hotel for like several weeks by himself. I mean, it definitely seems like he could have used more supervision. I mean, I know
Tom's there. Tom's watching it. And
yeah, I mean that doesn't really seem adequate.
So it does make me wonder if the wizarding sort of coming of age thing is a little bit different than ours, in which case Sirius is certainly culpable for what he does at 16.
Makes him even more responsible, yeah. And I mean, they were doing super advanced magic in terms of their transformations. I mean, I think they did know better. And James, like, what, you know, I guess he stopped Snape from going in there, I guess because he didn't want his friend to get in trouble, right? Not out of any desire to, you know, save Snape's life. But here's another thing that I also mentioned for the first time around this whole episode, or the you know, Harry is really worried that he has, by stopping Peter from being killed, you know, he's played a part in Voldemort's rise. And Dumbledore says, well, when a wizard saves another wizard's life, that's very powerful. Well, James has saved Snape's life, but that's never really mentioned again.
Yeah.
And, you know, in terms of creating any debt in Snape, but it should, right, according to what Dumbledore says.
I think in the first book we hear about it because that's the explanation that's given for why Snape hates Harry, and then he saved Harry's life at some point in that book, and he's like, so now we're even. But I also feel like by the time you finish the series, the only reason you remember that Snape is mad at James is because of Lily. You've kind of forgotten the rest of this by the time you get there.
Yeah, and the only reason that he does anything to help Harry is because of Lily. I really wonder what he felt about that to James. I mean, of course, it's like horrible because he did owe his life to someone that he despised for many reasons. But according to this sort of wizarding, you know, law or practice, then he did have to do something for him. And in a way, I guess he also, like, was this compounded by the fact that he asked Voldemort to spare Lily's life, but not James, right? So here he should have done something to help James, but he totally didn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder if it was always kind of at play a little bit to explain or support some of the things he did for Harry, but he never wanted to think about that. Like, he always wanted to attribute it to, you know, his choice or his, you know, his positive emotions to Lily, and not this, like, yeah, and that horrible thing happened, and this person that was like the last person I would want to help me is the one who helped me. But I feel like that must have created part of the obligation.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Well, thank you, Sarah, for coming on Potterwatch.
It was an honor.
All right. I didn't
get a nickname.
I'm sorry?
I didn't get a nickname.
What should we nickname you?
I don't know, but, like, you know, all the Potterwatch guests, right, had, because they were.
Yes, a code name for out in the Forest of Dean, and we listened to Potterwatch.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have to think about that. I'll put it in the YouTube title. I'll put your name there. Okay, good. Thank you, Sarah.
All right, thanks.